Have you ever wondered how an enemy reacts to seeing a revolutionary weapon for the first time? Something that seems to have come from another world? In 1942, in the skies over the Pacific, Japanese pilots began reporting disturbing sightings. An American aircraft unlike anything they had ever seen was hunting their best aces. The Japanese nicknamed it the two-tailed demon. The Lockheed P38 Lightning wasn't just another fighter. It was a war machine that challenged everything Japanese engineers believed about aircraft design. Imagine facing something completely unpredictable in your line of work. That's exactly how the pilots of the Empire of the Rising Sun felt when they saw that distinctive silhouette on the horizon. If you're a fan of world-changing war stories, like this video now and comment below which city you're watching from so I know where my stories are going. With its twin fuselages and central engine, the P-38 resembled a metallic alien streaking across the blue Pacific skies. But what truly terrified the Japanese wasn't just its appearance, it was its lethal ability to appear out of nowhere and disappear before they could react. What made the P-38 Lightning so technically special? The answer lay in its unique configuration, which broke all conventional military aviation rules of the time. Imagine if someone today created a smartphone with 3 screens when everyone else only uses 1. That's exactly the impact the Lightning made in 1940. When Lockheed engineers began designing the P-38, they faced a seemingly impossible challenge, creating an interceptor fighter capable of flying at over 600 km/h and with sufficient range for long-haul operations in the vast Pacific. A conventional solution would simply be impossible with the technology of the time. The genius lay in the twin fuselage configuration. While other fighters had a single engine, the Lightning had 2 1,475 horsepower Allison V1710 engines, a total of 2,950 gross horsepower. To put this in perspective, imagine driving a regular 150 horsepower car, and suddenly someone with a nearly 3,000 horsepower vehicle appears on the same road. What would your reaction be? That's exactly how Japanese engineers felt when they analyzed the first captured P-38s. But it wasn't just about raw power. The unique configuration allowed for something revolutionary: the complete concentration of weapons in the nose of the aircraft. While conventional fighters like the Japanese Zero had machine guns spread across the wings, creating a dispersed fire pattern, the P-38 concentrated 4 Browning 50 machine guns and a 20mm Hispano cannon in a single focal point. It was like comparing a shotgun to a surgically accurate rifle. A top speed of 667 km/h, 410 mph, at an altitude of 7,600 meters, 25,000 feet, made the Lightning faster than any existing Japanese fighter. The famous Zero, the pride of Japanese aviation and the terror of the early years of the war, could barely reach 533 km/h, 333 mph, under ideal conditions. This meant the P-38 could choose when and how to engage in combat, a devastating tactical advantage. The operational ceiling was even more impressive: 13,400 meters. At this altitude, where the air is so thin we can barely breathe, the Lightning operated with lethal efficiency, while the Japanese fighters struggled just to maintain lift. It was like having a sniper positioned atop a skyscraper, while the enemy was confined to the ground floor. The range of flight shattered all paradigms of aerial combat in the Pacific. With internal tanks, the P-38 could fly over 2,100 kilometers, enough to escort bombers on missions deep into enemy territory, and still have enough fuel for combat. The Japanese, accustomed to short-range fighters, simply couldn't understand how the Americans could appear in impossible places. Can you imagine the psychological toll of facing a technology that completely redefines the rules of the game you once mastered? Japanese reports described Lightning as impossible according to our engineering calculations. It was technology that seemed to come from the future. The counter-rotating propeller system eliminated torque, a chronic problem in single-engine fighters that caused instability. In the P-38, the propellers rotated in opposite directions, canceling out the torque forces and creating a rock-steady firing platform. Pilots reported that it was like firing from a fixed table, not from an aircraft in combat. How would you feel about facing a machine that breaks every rule you know about what's possible? Which city are you watching this video from? Comment below, and tell me if you've heard a similar story from your family about wars or innovations that changed everything overnight. Because what I'm about to tell you about the psychological impact of the P-38 will show how a machine can literally break the morale of seasoned warriors. The psychological impact of the P-38 Lightning on Japanese pilots was beyond devastating. It was apocalyptic. To understand the magnitude of this terror, we must delve into captured Japanese intelligence reports, pilot diaries, and military documents that reveal a disturbing truth. The Lightning didn't just shoot down aircraft, it destroyed minds. Imagine being a seasoned professional in your field, mastering your skills for years, and suddenly a technology appears that renders everything you know completely useless. This is exactly how veteran Japanese pilots felt when the two-tailed demon began to haunt the skies over the Pacific. Major Hiroshi Nishizawa, considered one of the greatest Japanese aviation aces with more than 80 confirmed victories, wrote in his personal diary a passage that still gives us chills today. It's like fighting ghosts from hell. They appear from the clouds like metallic demons, strike with the precision of death personified, and disappear before our eyes can follow their movements. It's not war, it's execution. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai, another legendary Japanese pilot, recounted his first experience with a P-38 even more dramatically. I saw my squadron mates being shot down one by something that seemed to come from another world. We couldn't even fight back. It was like trying to fight lightning from the sky. But the real psychological horror began when the Japanese discovered the Lightning's revolutionary tactics. The P-38 developed the boom and zoom strategy, diving at high speed from stratospheric altitudes, striking with surgical precision, and climbing again before the enemy could even process what had happened. Consider this situation. You're playing a sport you've mastered for years, knowing all the rules and strategies, and suddenly your opponent starts playing in a way that simply shouldn't be possible based on the rules you know. It's exactly this sense of desperation that consumed the Japanese drivers. The Japanese, masters of prolonged aerial combat and acrobatic maneuvers, tactics they had mastered in the early years of the war, simply couldn't adapt to this new form of three-dimensional warfare. The Zero was designed for close, prolonged dogfights. But how do you fight something that attacks and disappears in a matter of seconds? Japanese medical reports began to document something never before seen: lightning-specific combat neuroses. Experienced pilots, veterans of hundreds of missions, began to suffer panic attacks at the mere sight of the P-38's distinctive silhouette on the horizon. Some refused to fly missions where lightning might be present. The most disturbing phenomenon was the phantom sightings. Japanese pilots began reporting P-38s even when there were no lightnings within hundreds of miles. The psychological trauma was so intense that their minds created non-existent threats. Japanese military doctors described these as acute combat stress hallucinations. Captain Yasuhiko Kuroe wrote in his military report, "Our men are seeing demons where none exist. Fear of the lightning is consuming our pilots faster than their cannons. We lost the psychological war before we even lost it physically." What would you do if you faced something that completely changed the rules of the game you'd mastered? How would you react if your experience and knowledge simply no longer worked? The situation became so critical that the Japanese command had to develop anti-lightning protocols, specific instructions on how to avoid direct confrontations with P-38s. This amounted to officially admitting that their best pilots could not compete with this American machine. The most frightening aspect was its deadly accuracy. While other fighters required prolonged bursts to hit their targets, the P-38, with its concentrated armament, destroyed aircraft in bursts lasting 2 or 3 seconds. Japanese pilots reported seeing comrades explode instantly, as if touched by a magic wand of death. The P-38 Lightning didn't just terrify the Japanese, it completely redefined air warfare in the Pacific and created a legacy that resonates to this day in modern military aviation. To grasp the magnitude of this impact, imagine an innovation so revolutionary that it forces an entire enemy to rethink decades of military strategy. That's exactly what happened when the two-tailed demon entered the scene. The numbers alone tell an epic story of aerial dominance. The Lightning was responsible for more Japanese downings than any other American fighter in the Pacific theater, a staggering total of over 1,800 confirmed aerial victories. But these cold numbers don't capture the true revolution this machine represented. Richard "Dick" Bong, flying his P-38 nicknamed Marge, became the greatest American ace of all time, with 40 confirmed victories, all against Japanese aircraft. Bong described his Lightning as a lethal extension of my will. Thomas McGuire Jr., the second highest American ace with 38 victories, also flew a P-38. These two men, flying Lightnings, shot down more enemy aircraft than many entire squadrons of other fighters. But can you imagine the psychological impact when the Japanese discovered that just two American pilots flying P-38s had destroyed nearly 80 of their best aircraft and most experienced pilots? It was like discovering that two gladiators had defeated an entire army. The most symbolic and devastating blow came on April 18, 1943, in a mission the Japanese considered supernatural. 16 P-38 Lightnings of the 339th Fighter Wing flew 400 miles over enemy territory to intercept the plane carrying Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the very architect of the Pearl Harbor attack. The operation's precision was surgical. The P-38s intercepted exactly at the predicted time and place, shot down the Mitsubishi G4M bomber carrying Yamamoto, and disappeared once again into the vastness of the Pacific. For the Japanese, this wasn't just an American military victory. It was as if the two-tailed demons possessed divine powers of prediction and execution. How would you feel if you discovered that the enemy not only knew your supreme leader's secret movements, but had a weapon capable of executing a death sentence from hundreds of miles away with absolute precision? The strategic impact was even more profound. The P-38's success forced the Japanese to completely abandon their doctrine of light, maneuverable fighters. They began desperate development of high-altitude interceptors like the Ki-44 Tojo and later the Ki-84 Frank in a frantic attempt to create something capable of competing with the Lightning. But the P-38's influence transcended the Pacific theater. In Europe, pilots like Antoine de Saint-Exupéry flew P-38s on reconnaissance missions over occupied France. The famous author of The Little Prince disappeared flying a Lightning in 1944, becoming part of the aircraft's romantic legend. The Lightning's revolutionary configuration influenced future generations of military aircraft. The concept of a double fuselage, concentrated armament, and multiple engines can be seen in modern aircraft such as the A-10 Thunderbolt II and even in contemporary military drones. The psychological legacy was equally lasting. Japanese veterans interviewed decades after the war still described the P-38 with a mixture of respect and almost mystical terror. Saburo Sakai, in his memoirs published in the 1950s, wrote, "The Lightning was not just an aircraft, it was the embodiment of American technological superiority. When we saw that silhouette in the sky, we knew we were facing the future of aviation." The P-38's total production of 10 Thou-37 may seem modest compared to other fighters of the era, but its impact was disproportionate. Each Lightning was equivalent to several conventional fighters in terms of operational capability and psychological impact. Think about it. How many technologies do you know that not only dominated their field, but literally redefined the rules for all competitors? The P-38 Lightning did just that, creating a new paradigm of aerial warfare that influences military design to this day. If you enjoyed this epic story of how a revolutionary machine changed the course of history, how about videos about the Corsair the Japanese called the Whistling Death, how American radar turned Japanese fighters into sitting ducks, or the B-29 that broke Japanese morale before the atomic bomb? Let us know in the comments which of these untold stories you'd like to see next. If you want more fascinating stories about aviation legends and world-changing wars, be sure to subscribe now and hit the bell so you don't miss a thing. Share this video with a friend who loves military history and world-changing technology.